the next day. I stayed with Jesus and his astounded friends as they climbed a short way down the mountain, looking for a cave that Elijah had recommended to them. I find the concept of place almost as confusing as that of time, and it is a miracle to me that Elijah should remember the location of a particular hole in the rock when so many years of time have passed by in his absence. But then, he is a remarkable man. When they found it, James lit a fire to keep them warm through the night. Peter tried to catch something for them to eat, but he had the success you would expect from a fisherman out of water. The disciples slept well despite their empty stomachs. Jesus lay thinking through all that he'd discussed with Moses and Elijah. In one sense, he's always known the real nature of his task, but now that it has been expressed in human words, the details lie heavily on his mind and spirit. This morning, after refreshing themselves in a mountain stream, the group descended to the plain below. They walked in silence, Peter and John still numb from the indescribable sights of yesterday. On their return to the villages at the foot of the mountain, they stepped into the middle of chaos. The remaining 9 disciples had taken it upon themselves to do what has become routine for them over the recent weeks. They spent their days in the Exeloth village square, announcing the dawn of my boss's new work, illustrating their messages by healing people with handicaps and illnesses. If they'd understood anything of all that Jesus had been telling them for the last week, they might have realized that now was not the time for such activities. And so it was that Jesus' silent and thoughtful descent from the high point of yesterday's encounter ended in a scrummage of excited villagers, all anxious to hear from the famous preacher from Nazareth. Casting my eye across the mob that met us, I immediately spotted a man in particular distress. I pointed him out to the son, but my guidance was unnecessary. A moment later, the man shouted, "Teacher, I beg you, come and see my son. He's only young and he's beset with a spirit which grabs him and throws him to the ground. It happens every day. Your disciples said that they would be able to sort it out, but he's no better." That was just one voice among nearly 100, all clamouring for the son's attention, all wanting their own needs to be met and their own problems to be solved. Jesus, preoccupied by the painful detail of his Father's plan, struggled to take in the continuing frenzy for attention which has dominated his life for the last 2 years. He quickly mastered his frustrations and called out to the worried father, "Bring your son over here." The man and his son pushed their way forward through the crowd. As they did, Jesus asked his disciples to try and disperse the villagers because they had to leave immediately. The boy was brought to Jesus. His father was holding his right hand, and on the boy's other side was a big, bullying opposition spirit. I've seen the type before, a dull, dispirited creature, who had probably taken advantage of some minor lie or rebellion of the lads and latched onto him, pushing and shoving him for pointless sport. As soon as the spirit saw my boss's son, he knew that his game was over. Jesus, eager to get on the road, was brief. He banished the spirit from the planet, healed the boy's numerous injuries, and handed him to his dad. While the villagers stood marvelling at what they'd witnessed, Jesus walked away with his disciples. The people of Exeloth never did get to hear his stories. As soon as they were out of sight from the crowd, still walking at a fair pace, Jesus called his followers to gather round him. "Now listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you," he said with urgency and intensity. "I'm going to be betrayed into the hands of the authorities. They will kill me, and after 2 days I will rise again." No one replied. Many of them wanted to take Jesus to task about his gloomy prediction, but they did not dare. They remembered what had happened to Peter a few days earlier. At last the silence was ended by Thomas. "Where are we going, Master?" I was pleased by his question because I was as keen as him to know the answer. "Today we're going home to Capernaum. Then as soon as everything is ready, we go to Jerusalem. We must be there for the Passover festival." Jesus strode ahead purposefully, and I joined him. Behind us, the disciples chattered. The chattering became a debate, and in time that grew into a full-blown argument. Jesus responded by walking even faster to escape their squabbling. In his mind, he was rehearsing again and again the events that awaited him in Jerusalem. Each time, the story he imagined was subtly different. All the while, I could see him in a new mood that grew stronger and was soon influencing his every thought. To my amazement, this highly charged emotion began to affect me, filling me with a sensation which I've never experienced before. Jesus is deeply troubled by the road ahead, and I was being caught up in this most human experience. That night, the son and I reached his modest home some while before the others. He busied himself opening up the house, filling water jars, lighting a fire and baking some bread. The 12 arrived to see the house warm and welcoming. Bread, cheese, salted fish were laid on the table for supper, and bowls of warm water in the doorway for them to wash their feet. This was not all Jesus' work. There is a loyal group of local women who are always willing to give him a hand in the practical matters of life. The travellers cleaned up and turned their attention to the food. While they filled their faces, Jesus casually asked, "What were you arguing about on the road?" The response was an embarrassed silence. They'd been arguing about which of them was the best disciple. Jesus sat on a small stool by the door beside the bowls of dirty water. "Which of you desires to be the best must become the servant of you all," he said. With that, he picked up 2 bowls and took them outside to empty them. He returned with a young girl, the daughter of Salome, one of Jesus' helpers. He led the girl into the middle of the room and crouched down next to her, surrounded by the 12 grown men. "If you welcome this little girl in my name, then you welcome me," he said. "And if you welcome me, you welcome the one who sent me." Jesus and the girl gathered up the uneaten food and cleared the table. No one dared speak. The girl skipped off smiling, and Jesus picked up the remaining water bowl. Standing in the doorway, he said, "Whichever of you is the least of all, he is the greatest." With that, he left the house saying to me, "Let's go for a walk."